to avoid forgetting, I'll just do that now. And cool. How is everyone? Oh,
good. Oh,
Tracy's here.
Tracy's here.
Yeah, Tracy made it. She came in hot, she said.
Right on. Hi, Tracy. You can hear me yet?
You got to turn
I
it
can't
on.
hear anything.
You got to turn it on.
Hi, Tracy. Hello, hello, testing.
Nope, she still can't
Are
hear.
you plugged in?
Oh, and I sent the invitation to
I see
my friend whose book I'm editing.
That's what I get for coming in hot.
Just in case he wanted to kind of check this out. So he may be coming in anonymously.
Great.
Or
The more the merrier.
Well, the more the merrier. I think it's fun. It's like a real party, Real party in my apartment, you always come with strangers. Otherwise, it's not fun, So, bring your stranger. I guess that's a party on its own right. Okay, I'm just gonna. So.
You're not plugged in.
Test, testing.
Test, 1 2 1 2.
Can you hear me, Bishop?
I don't understand what's going on here.
Yeah, so we can. Lenny, did you get the deck that I sent you?
I did. It's on my list. I have.
You have it?
Yeah, no problem. I just thought I would
both
ask
ears?
while they were. There we go. They will.
I need to send you. I think you know.
Oh, no problem.
Huh?
No problem.
Can I tell you it's very summary in a way, like, and I'm enjoying it very much, but I need to.
Okay.
Can you hear?
Oh,
Yeah, we got it. Sorry about that.
That's good. It's good.
Yay!
Right.
All right.
Hi, James.
Hi, how's it going? Sorry, that was really loud. How are you doing?
Good. How about you?
I'm doing great.
Oh, sorry.
Move
closer.
Just move the mic. I have you set up.
Oh.
Letty, do you want to get started, and then as people join in, they can join in?
Yeah, absolutely. So let me see. I'm gonna admin quickly. We have some people coming in.
Oh, great.
Hello everyone. Very excited about this event today. Most of you know me. My name is Laetitia Barbier, and I run with my colleague Joanna Ebenstein. We run Morbid Anatomy, and today is a very special day. This is the second opus of James Tarot Talk Show. Here's the rush hour. People are coming in slowly. Yes, and so I'm very proud that James took this opportunity of kind of like plugging into our little tarot salon program, and I'm very excited to be witnessing the second opus for many reasons. I'm not gonna talk too much because I'm a terrible introducer, but I just wanted to congratulate James for this initiative, and give a warm welcome to Tracy and Bryan, and tell to everyone I'm super excited to have you all here. So I'm gonna slowly recede in the background and leave the comments to James, but I'm here, so if you need anything.
Oops,
you muted yourself too soon.
I'm gonna be around. I'm just sorry. I'm like, everyone is coming at the same time.
All good. It's all good.
Ribbon of this event, you can start.
Thanks. Well, I appreciate everybody coming here today, and today we have the pleasure of hosting Bishop Bryan Ouellette and Tracy Ouellette, also known as Sister Maximillian. I met the bishop and Sister Max in Georgia when we were working on a film called Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It. And in my work in the Conjuring universe, one of the things that I'm responsible for is organizing set blessings on the set. And we invited the bishop to come down and do our set blessing on that title. I did send around a link to a video that has some footage of his work on the set. But we became very friendly, and actually the bishop and Tracy were invited to come back to the set to do a second set blessing, because one of our actors was doing a scene that she felt spiritually uncomfortable with and wanted an additional blessing for that set and before we did the work. So he came back, and then the director invited them to come back and do some consultation for accuracy in some of the rites that were being performed on screen. So I spent a lot of time with these guys in Georgia and became quite fond of them. And one of the things that I found really interesting about Bishop Bryan is he's probably the least likely stereotype of what you would consider a Catholic bishop to be. For one thing, Tracy is his wife, and he has a son. They have a son, and he is I don't know, is humanist the right designation? Much more humanist than many in the church that I've met or encountered have been. The bishop also read my tarot cards when we were in Atlanta, and Tracy was there, and I had been playing with tarot cards for years, but never really connected to them and never really had a proper reading done before Bryan read my cards. And it was a profound reading that had a very lingering effect on me and my life. And it was an important reading that pointed out some relationships that weren't really working in my life that I wasn't willing to acknowledge. Anyway, I don't want to take up all this time talking, but I was wondering, before I start pulling some cards to help direct the conversation, if you could talk a little bit about what it means to be an independent Catholic bishop. Tell us a little bit about your church and your ministry, and a little bit about how you came to be involved in tarot.
Sure. Well, first, I'm happy to be here. It's always good to talk with you, James. And yeah, that was a wild time, back in the Conjuring 3 days. It was great. But yeah, I guess you could say the difference of being independent versus one that is bound to the rules and regulations of the authority of Rome is that we have the luxury of being more humanist in our approach to things and being more pragmatic with what we are able to accomplish in the work that we do. I really do feel that religion requires a more pragmatic approach. So that would be the word I would use. I mean, I could see humanist works too, but I just see myself as being far more pragmatic than the traditional clergy of the Roman Catholic Church. It gives me the luxury of doing what religion was essentially designed to do, which is to bring people to a deeper understanding of freedom. Holiness is secondary, and that's one thing that I think a lot of people get wrong. They reverse them. They put holiness above everything else, and there is no holiness without freedom. Freedom has to come first. That's kind of how that's actually what the story of Adam and Eve and the fall of man and original sin and all this stuff is really about. It's not so much about how horrible human beings are. It's more about that God loves us so much to give us the freedom to even violate holiness, because we were able to. And we were able to actually use that as a means to come back to this realization. Traditional Catholicism doesn't really get into that. They won't get into that. They don't want to get into that. And some of it has to do with the traditional stereotypes that you obviously are familiar with. I mean, pop culture has dealt with it over and over again, that religion's about control. And essentially it is not, it is being misused that way. It's kind of like anything else in the world. I mean, you can have a wonderful, German or Japanese knife collection to cut your sushi or your food, but you can also stab someone with those knives too. So it's how you use the tool. It's not the tool itself that's the problem. And so religion is like a tool. Okay, it's a very powerful tool, far more powerful than a butcher knife. You can murder people with it. You can control people with it. But you can also use it to liberate and to grant freedom. And so I chose that path. And that was not a path that could be accomplished through the Vatican. I hate to say it, it's just the truth. They're wonderful with theology. When we have to refer our understanding of scripture or, our theological principles, we always come back to the magisterium of the Holy Roman Catholic Church. But when it comes to administration, we do things our way. And our way is about connecting with people in a certain relevancy to the way that they are today, where people are at today, meeting them where they're at today. And that means that we have to kind of step outside our paradigm a little bit and kind of throw the box away so that we can move into a better direction. So that's what this church is about. So I administrate what is known as the Holy Nicholean Catholic Church. And it is a completely independent, autocephalous, esoteric Catholic Church. So what that means is it doesn't mean we're into weird things. What it means is we're free to philosophize. So our theology would be indistinguishable from any, no Roman Catholic would struggle with our theology. They would fully understand it. It would just be something that they would immediately recognize in their own work, in their own spiritual life. But when it comes to other avenues of expression, we don't shun them. We don't label them as evil. We explore them. We integrate them into our personal spirituality, and not the spirituality of the religion, not the spirituality of the church. It's just our members are free to be who they are, where they're at. And wherever they meet God in that journey is up to them and God. It's not up to us. We're just there to facilitate the connection. And that's all. That's where it begins and ends. So that's why we can come into things like the subject of tarot cards, because this church isn't afraid of things like that. We're not afraid of pieces of paper, cardboard. We're not afraid of archetypes. We're dealing with them. They're all in our head anyway. So all the tarot is just a reflection of what's already inside. And the tarot helps to connect with these things on a deeper, more intimate spiritual level. And see, I've been studying the tarot for more than 30 years now. I've been teaching it for a little over half that time. And I got into teaching it because I feel that, well, I can give anybody a reading. The best reading you're ever going to be able to get is the one that you do for yourself, if you know how to do it for yourself. There are people that say never read for yourself, and I don't subscribe to that model. I think that it can be dangerous to read for yourself if you don't know what you're doing, but if you are trained properly, then you can actually get a far better reading from your own relationship with the deck than you can through a reader or something like that. So that's kind of the basis of how I got into tarot and what the church is and what an independent Catholic is and why I can be both pragmatic and humanist.
So one of the cards that I reshuffled it, but while you were, so I'll have to look for it. But one of the cards that I pulled while you were talking about reading for yourself, I pulled the 8 of Swords. And so just so that you guys know, I'm using a deck today that I find to be really intriguing. It's Leonard Jim Marquez Narciso's Urban Incantations Tarot deck. This is a photographic tarot deck that is manipulated with computer digital technology. So it's not an AI deck for those of you who have strong feelings one way or the other about AI. So you're talking about reading for yourself and the dangers that that may exist if you don't know how to properly read tarot. And this card, which we all know, I think the Eight of Swords is a card about being trapped, being blinded and trapped, and there is an avenue out that we perhaps can't see. This card, I think, is an interesting interpretation of that with the barbed wire. It's a contemporary, it's meant to be a contemporary feeling deck that we can sort of plug into and relate to. So I think it's interesting that this is the card that I pulled while you were talking about the dangers of reading for yourself. Why do you feel that it's dangerous to read for yourself if you don't have an understanding of the cards? And what is that danger?
Well, it's not a mortal danger. It's more of a comprehension danger. I think the Eight of Swords in the deck that, this is going to be funny to some people who know tarot, but my favorite deck is Crowley's Thoth deck. So, I couldn't be the furthest thing from Crowley as a man, but I thought he was a brilliant occultist, and he made a hell of a deck. So I love it. And it's my first deck that I really ever connected with. He calls the Eight of Swords interference, and I like that keyword because it can be all sorts of different types of interference. Sometimes when you see provocative imagery like that, it looks more severe than it is. Sometimes it can just be a block that you are just unwilling or unable to get past, and that's what I exactly am saying that can be the danger here. Because when you read for yourself, if you don't know how to turn off your conscious input, then what ends up happening is the tarot just becomes a mirror, and it will just reflect back your wishes and your fears, one or the other, whichever's stronger for that particular situation. So the big danger is misinterpretation. So a lot of times with students who have been playing around with the tarot before they take my class, sometimes they get disillusioned with it early on and say, all it ever does is tells me what I want to hear. I said, well, yeah, that's exactly what it's doing. And that's exactly what it starts out doing. It's a mirror. You have to know how to teach it to reflect the part of you that you need to know about, not your wishes and not your fears. And that's typically what subconsciously is always revolving around our psyche. So at any given point in time, if you're not skilled in separating that part of yourself during a session where you're reading for yourself, then that's what you're going to get back, and it's not going to be useful information. So in order to increase your accuracy level, what you really have to do is know how to shut off those subconscious inputs, I call them. And so the way that's done is mindfulness. So this is where Buddhist technique becomes a brilliant strategy. I particularly like using Tibetan mantras for this, and the best one is actually all about surrendering oneself and seeing the emptiness in all things, and bringing oneself into sort of the state of the bardo while alive, which is kind of the halfway point between things, not just life and death, but can be between anything, can be between moments. So we slow ourselves down with meditation. We use mantra to focus and to detach from our conscious feelings. So what I always tell people to do when you're reading for yourself, the most important thing you can do is formulate your question very carefully. Always, the more specific the question, the more specific the answer. So I don't like when people are like, "Oh, just show me what you see." Then, okay, I can show you what you want, but it's not fortune telling. I don't teach fortune telling. I teach how to read the archetypes that are active in your life. And that requires a relationship. It needs to be participatory. We need, you know, a little bit of energy from you. I'm not trying to wow you with my ability to read your mind. I want to be able to engage in a psychic exchange where we can see what's really going on. What archetypes are alive in your situation, and how do we best utilize them? Because there's always dynamic energy and there's always static energy, and you want to know how to be able to integrate both. So in this particular situation, when we're dealing with, the question, we want to make sure that we're specific. We're asking the right kind of questions. We want to know what will happen if I do this, not what's going to happen. All right. Because you don't want to give your power away. So when you say what's going to happen, well, okay, now you're at the mercy. Now the archetypes are like, okay, it's playtime. I can just do whatever I want. If I want to screw with this guy, I'm going to screw with this guy, and they will. And they have a grand old time doing that to people, and people are all too happy to comply and be, controlled by, like a puppet, by this archetypal puppet master. So what you want to do is, first of all, always take back your control. Your question should always be from a place of empowerment. So it's not what's going to happen. What will happen if I do this? What will happen if I do that? And, you formulate spreads that are based upon trying to empower yourself. And that's the number one thing. The second thing is, once you have your question, you keep it firm in mind, and then you can start your shuffle, but then you need to release it. That question needs to be completely dismissed at that point, to the point where by the time, if you do it right, by the time you're done shuffling the deck and you're ready to actually lay out the cards, you don't even remember what the question is anymore. It's that far from your mind. That way you're not imprinting anything into it, subconsciously or otherwise, and all it's reflecting back is now truth. You're no longer distorting the truth. You're not getting in the way of the mirror. Now it's reflecting what's actually there. And so that's a lot of what I teach my students in getting them acclimated to using an oracle, and that's really the best way to do it.
You were talking about mindfulness and emptying yourself, and I thought that was interesting because for me personally, this past week, I usually pull a card at the beginning of the week from a deck that resonates for me for whatever reason. I have a variety of decks, and one of the decks that I like to pull from for guidance is the Angelarium Oracle. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this deck.
Yes.
I think that Peter's artwork is really incredible, and it's interesting. This is the card that I pulled for myself this week, my mindfulness card. This is what you need to be focusing on, which is emptiness. And when I first pulled it, I thought, no, emptiness. My initial reaction to that was a negative reaction.
Yeah.
It's an emptiness. Like I thought, an emptiness of my world, my sorrow, my outlook, I would feel empty. And then the more I looked at the card, I was like, no, you need to empty yourself. You need to clear yourself of whatever energy you have that you're bringing into the week, so that you can face the week on its own terms, rather than some preconceived notion of what is happening. This deck that I told you about, the Urban Incantations deck, this is a Rider-Waite-Smith based deck. And sure. I know you like the Thoth deck. As you were talking, I pulled this card a couple of times while you were talking. I pulled the Lover's card. I have difficulty with this card when it's presented as a love card versus a choice or a crossroads card. Yeah. And this one strikes me as a love card, the Lover's love card.
Yeah.
But what you're talking about, a lot of what you're talking about, does have to do with crossroads when you're approaching the deck and how you position yourself to be able to read, not just for yourself, but for other people.
Well, it's also about relationship too. The lovers is not just about, significant others or spouses.
Right.
It's also about relationship as its own thing. And we can have relationships with all sorts of things. We can have a relationship with food that can be both healthy or unhealthy. If you overeat, that's a bad relationship with food. We have a relationship with God. We have a relationship with the divine. We have a relationship with the tarot, with the archetype. So I interpret that to be about that it's about an exchange. We have to be participatory in it. I think a lot of people today struggle with spirituality, be it traditional religious kind or the more innovative, sorts that we have today.
Sure.
I think they struggle with it because they want it to do something for them. Religion doesn't do anything for you that again, it's another kind of mirror. It only gives you what you give back. So if you put in all sorts of negativity into it, that's all you're going to get back out of it. And typically it's also a mutual experience. So if you get a whole lot of people putting negative experiences into it, then you're sharing in theirs as well. It's getting reflected back at you, and it creates a very miserable experience, which drives a lot of people away from religion. Understandably so. I was one of them several times, in fact. But when it comes back to the tarot, same thing. Okay, so the tarot, if we're talking about how to interpret well and how to get that relationship with it, it means what are you putting into it? And in this particular case, less is more. So it's actually not so much with the tarot, what you're putting into it, it's what you're not putting into it. We want that to be a clean slate so it can just reflect clearly what's there. So that other card you had there with the mindfulness makes very good sense. I think emptiness is something that does scare people because I think, when people get really deep into Tibetan or Buddhist philosophy, one of the things that they have to contend with is this sense that, my God, this is nihilism. And it's the furthest thing from nihilism, but nihilism is the first step to getting beyond it. So it's like a good word for this in Buddhism, and we don't have time to get into all the details of it, but people can look it up if they're interested, is shunyata. Shunyata is the emptiness of realization, but it's not an emptiness in the sense that there's nothing. It's an emptiness in the sense that there's nothing unreal there, that all you have left is the truth of all things. And what we do is, because we're archetypal stories ourselves, we're just imprinting all this fiction into everything, into our identities, into our concepts. And all of that needs to go when true spirituality does not define these things. Okay. So no matter how you see yourself, I mean, look, a bishop is a role I play for the good of what I do. It's not who I am. This is why I can be all sorts of different things. I write music, I fly planes, I cook, these are all things I do, but I don't identify with any of those things. These are just things that they're roles I play. They're faces I put on for a particular function in the cosmos, but I don't attach to any of it. I realize that when you strip away all that, there's no me here to say that it's me. I'm just layers and layers of concept that I've created around myself. And that all needs to go. When you're dealing with the tarot, to have a true relationship with the tarot, that all needs to go. You have to be completely naked in front of it. So that way you get the truth. And we're not really great. We're not a species that likes truth too much. What did you say, Tracy? I mean,
Yeah.
So
I
think
we'll
that's
say more than that, Tracy. Thank you, Bryan. I want to hear a little bit about what you have to say as well, especially as we're talking about relationships and the tarot. But can you talk? I pulled a card for you as I was about to ask and this question, and I pulled the Fool card, which is one of my favorite cards. Tell me why you're laughing at that.
I'm laughing because I I'm laughing because my immediate knowledge of the tarot is rather limited. What I do know is by proxy of
what I do.
of being married to him. I have tried. I understand archetypes fairly well, but tarot I have struggled with. And so I'm laughing because on the surface, the Fool, you're pulling it for me when I'm over here thinking like, I don't know.
You walk blindly into that,
Yes.
into that reality.
I know a little to get by, but I'm not adept. Let's put it that way.
Right. Yeah.
Well, I mean, listen, I love this particular rendition of the Fool because I think that it really speaks to a lot of what the Fool means in our contemporary society. You've got a guy out here at night, a guy or a woman, I don't know, we can't tell, hitchhiking, blind faith in an adventure on an empty road, has no idea where it's going, leading off into the woods, but surrendering to that unknown. Not only surrendering to it, but embracing it, and wherever it may take him or her, which is exactly what I love about the Fool. And so rather than speaking about what that means for you in the tarot, I'm curious to know about that adventure that you have with Bryan, and how did that start, and what does it mean, and like how did that happen?
So
like the Fool.
I mean that it is a lot of
blind faith, kind of thing. Go ahead.
I mean, well, we've been married just over 20 years.
Over 21 now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it is a lot of that blind faith. We knew each other for years. We were friends for years before we even considered like a relationship or anything like that. But we were really good friends. And there was just a moment. There was a day where I was like, I'm going to spend the rest of my life with this man. And it's actually kind of funny because I call it the epiphany. And I don't talk about this publicly very often, but I call it the epiphany. And I had kind of not a vision, but kind of a visionary experience. And it's actually very similar to that card that you pulled where I'm standing in a field. It's kind of got that golden light that's in that card a little bit there. It's very rural. It's very rustic. And I'm standing there with him. And in that visionary moment, it was like, no matter what happens, no matter what comes, I'm spending it with this man. I'm there for it. I'm here for him. And that's pretty much been
which is funny
experience.
Because I was very deep into another relationship, a very serious relationship at the time that this happened. So if she would have presented this to me,
and I kept it quiet. I didn't.
I mean, I would have completely laughed it off as being utter nonsense, because I mean, my direction in life at that point was not on that page, and I would have not conceived of any way in which that could have materialized. So it was an interesting thing, to say the least, to hear it in retrospect, that's what really went on during that time, because I was content in my relationship at that time anyway, in the moment that she's referring to. And I would have never have thought in a million years that this friend that I talked to occasionally would have turned into a lifelong successful relationship, so it's the way life is, I think that's what the Fool's really about. It's about being open to all the possibilities, not a clean slate. And there's a story that's being told here, where you're pulling interference and how to overcome interference through correct relationship. And then how do we have a correct relationship with the tarot? That's through emptiness and basically going in with nothing. not going in with expectation. So the Fool's all about walking a path without expectation.
Willing to go with whatever comes your way.
Exactly. And that's been the story of our life. And that's kind of how I live my life all the time. I mean, honestly, look, I've given up trying to control anything. I don't think that there is such a thing as control. As much as people crave it and they want nothing more than that. It's not about control. It's about giving up control. That's how you get control, is by no longer wanting it, by not desiring.
It's interesting. I mean, I always find the cards interesting. I was so naive and ignorant of the power of tarot when we met. And in the past year and a half, I've just been blown away every time I pull a spread. As you were talking about, being empty and allowing yourself to see and being blinded or trapped by preconception. I pulled the Four of Pentacles and I pulled it and I was like, I don't really like this, and it's not really relevant to what Bryan's talking about. So I'm going to put it back in the deck and continue to shuffle. So I did, and I pulled it again.
It came back again.
So clearly the deck was like, no, mofo, you're going to bring this up. But I think it is relevant in terms of what you're saying about being not being bound to the material. I mean, we live in the material world, right? We need material things. We have, and there's nothing wrong with wanting things and having a good life and a good home and a nice car and all of that stuff. But we can get trapped by those things and blinded by those things. How, I think for me, maybe what this is saying is to ask you, how do we avoid that happening? How can we use the tarot to free our inner eye and ground ourselves?
Well, the Four of
without
Pentacles,
being tied.
Yeah. The Four of Pentacles in Crowley's deck, the one I use, he gives a keyword to each one. And he calls that one power. So obviously the greatest power that we have at our disposal is control of resources, right? So if we're going to talk about wealth, it's about accumulation of wealth, but there are finite amounts of wealth. It's not like anybody can just have any amount and live as good as they want. If I have $1 million, that's $1 million you can never have, because somebody has to control it, right? So it's not about money. It's not about power or money. It's about control. The real power that human beings misuse is control. Just like we were talking, we started out the conversation dealing with religion, how it's been used as a means of control instead of freedom. So the antithesis to the Four of Pentacles is actually freedom, is liberation. Okay. There you go. Yeah, there it is. And you can see it's sort of like walling oneself into this fortress and, staying inside the box. It's how we consolidate power. It's how we consolidate control. And so in order to overcome, this is now you're going to get into why I'm a Christian. Because, you might say, well, look at this guy. Okay. He teaches tarot. He knows just about everything there is to know about any religion on the planet. Why are you a Christian bishop? I don't get it. And I'm sure a lot of people out there, over the years have seen me talk in different places and asked themselves that very question. I've asked myself that question, so I know it's out there. But the reality of it is that Christianity has one thing that no other religion has, and that is it perfectly expresses through archetypes the necessity of reversal. So in the story of Jesus, for example, how do we conquer death? Well, we face death and die. That's how we conquer death. How did Jesus resurrect? He dies on the cross. And what are we supposed to, we follow him. We take up our cross and we do the same thing. And by doing the very thing that we're trying to avoid, we end up conquering it. That's true power. And the only way that a power was ever accessible to either us or Jesus was by giving it all up. The complete opposite of what you would think you would need to do. So the answer to your question, which is the hardest thing in the world, is that if we want to overcome materialism and feelings of control, then we have to be willing to surrender our control. And that's a tough thing. That takes some practice. And that's where, again, mindfulness and meditation are all about that. That's what they're being taught. And I think that's also why when people go on these ayahuasca trips, they go to like South America to go on a journey, like they go to a shaman and they receive the ritual and they do the fasting, and then they take the ayahuasca, and it takes them into these life-changing experiences that are every bit real. I mean, it's not like it's like a drug-induced hallucination. It's like people that have gone and done this. I have not, but I would be willing to. It's probably the only type of thing like that I would ever do. I've never even tried marijuana. So, so it's like hallucinations and things like that. It's just, alcohol's about as strong as it gets for me, but ayahuasca I would do with under the supervision of a shaman who understands the nature of it. That's about giving up control. The reason that these experiences happen is because in order to take that journey, you have to give up everything that feels safe. So again, the four of Pentacles, four of discs is about safety. It's about hoarding. People become hoarders. They become materialistic. They become cheap. They become like little misers because they're afraid. If I don't save this, I might need it one day. Oh my, it's dangerous out there. I got to save everything. And we do that with life. We do that with everything, not just money. So again, it's about true confidence. It's about not worrying about where your next meal is going to come from. It's trusting in the process that if you are living your most authentic life and you're doing it skillfully, then you don't have to worry about where your next meal is going to come from. It'll be there one way or the other. You might have to work for it, but you're going to get it. You don't have to hoard to keep it. You don't have to create false security to keep it. And again, that becomes another barrier, another Eight of Swords kind of moment that keeps us away from that lover's relationship with the oracle, so that's how we do it. We have to give it up. And that's why I'm a Christian, because Christianity is about the method of giving up in order to attain the direct opposite of what you're afraid of.
I pulled the Six of Wands while you were concluding your explanation of the Four of Pentacles and letting go of that fear and conquering your fears by embracing them. So I think that's interesting. This card of a victory of a kind.
Yes.
And well, not of a kind here. I've got your Thoth deck is victory.
Victory. Yeah.
And
overcoming after a struggle. That is
one of the things.
Definition.
One of the things that I that happens to me with the cards when I'm reading for other people. This doesn't really happen when I'm reading for myself, because maybe I'm not listening to myself, or I'm not speaking. I'm not having a vocal conversation. But the cards, I feel like they listen. I like to shuffle when I'm reading for somebody rather than pulling, doing the whole spread at once. I like to continue talking and pull the cards as necessary, because I feel that they're listening to the conversation and they're responding to the conversation.
Yes.
And I think that Six of Wands is one more confirmation of that in my experience. Do you find that to be something that you experience as well when you're reading?
It does. I will typically lay out a spread in the traditional sense, but when the conversation unfolds, when we actually start having the exchange with a client, or even with myself, if I'm the court myself and I'm just looking at what I have to work with, I will draw qualifiers that way. So I kind of do both. If I feel it needs clarification, then as I'm engaging in that dialogue, then yes, they do in fact listen. I mean, there's a wonderful ancient Chinese, I guess it's a scroll, kind of how they these wall scrolls that they have, and it tells a wonderful story. They're all about a story, and you start on the right, and then if you actually follow the scroll through, it tells the whole story from beginning to end at the point that you get to the other side. And there's a wonderful one about the I Ching, which is the Chinese, a Chinese oracle. It works on the same principles of synchronicity, although it's more mathematical. Particularly if you use the yarrow sticks over the coins, because it actually has a disproportionate amount of chance that different results can come up. And if you use the yarrow, it's the more ancient system, and that disproportionate mathematics is important to the functioning of that oracle. But anyway, the way that this scroll is about the consultation, these ancient Chinese philosophers consulting the I Ching. And back in those days, they would even use tortoise shells. They would take a tortoise shell, put it on the fire, and it'd crack, and then they would read the cracks. That was another method of doing the I Ching. And while they're in the scroll, in the imagery, while they're doing the interpretation of the oracle, there's all the spirits of the ancestors just looking over them. And I think that's actually true. I mean, the ancestors, I don't see them as like our actual relatives that are out there in ghost form watching over us. I know that that's a popular opinion today, but I don't think that's accurate. I think that spiritual energy becomes part of the cosmos itself, and the cosmos itself is sentient. In fact, there's no way that we could be sentient if the cosmos that created us didn't already have the quality of sentience within it. So that sentience has to come from somewhere. And so, I think the entire universe is alive, and the entire universe is aware. And what we're communicating with the cards is literally that very cosmos. And this is its language. This is an alphabet. And as we lay out the cards, we're forming words and sentences that tell a story. And that's the divine language that it's speaking. And when we know how to interact with it and how to engage with it correctly and have that relationship, then it speaks to us. And so I think that's what you have found there, James, is that it's listening to you, it's speaking to you. And this is the way it has been for thousands of years, going back to the ancient sages of, ancient China or wherever. Every culture has a divinatory practice that originated in that area. You got Europe, Northern Europe, you have the runes. The tarot was actually a pictograph system for teaching the Bible. That's something a lot of people don't realize, is that the oldest decks have a lot of Christian imagery. A lot of what we understand to be the tarot today was created by people of the church. Now, the system itself, the numerology, that is the foundation to it. That's much older. That goes back to Hermeticism and ancient Egypt, and you could trace that back. But the tarot in its form today is it's European, Christianity at its finest. And then it became the Western mystery tradition through occultism as that developed. And it borrowed a lot from Kabbalah and other, disciplines in the area. But I mean, you go all over the world, there's oracles and there's divination everywhere. And that's speaking with the answers. That's speaking with the sentience of the cosmos. And yes, it does listen. I find it to be true. And it's very helpful if you know how to connect with it like you're doing. So that's great that you've discovered that it's taught you this on your own, that you didn't need a teacher to come and tell you that it does this. You sort of intuited, through intuition, you develop this relationship, which is the way it's exactly supposed to be. It's probably why you're proficient at it. You're kind of natural because of that.
I pulled the magician as we're
there it is.
talking about that.
Perfect. Yeah.
Which I think is, I don't want to go on forever. I mean, I could. I love talking with you, and I love listening to you. But I think that that's a good place to land. I did want to ask. There were two things that I wanted to bring up. One of them you touched upon before everybody joined in, so I'll circle back to that. But before we do that, I want to talk a little bit about the ministry that you do and the work that you do, and the reason that we met as a result of that work. Your work as an exorcist, and what that means in a contemporary society. Because one of the things that I thought was very interesting when you did our set blessing is you echoed a sentiment that another priest on another Conjuring movie had said that I had never really thought about, and you are so eloquent, and I'm not going to quote you properly here. But that is, I have the quote written down somewhere, but I don't have it printed out. Anyway, you said that when we make believe, when we're making movies or writing or acting things out in a play or at Halloween or whatever we do, that we are playing with imagination. We know it's not real, but the cosmos, the spirits, whatever is out there that may not be have our best interests at heart, doesn't distinguish between play and imagination and what is real and physical in this world. And so we can draw things into our world unintentionally through play. And can you talk a little bit about that and a little bit about your ministry with your through exorcism?
Sure.
And I know you have one coming up here pretty soon as well.
I do.
And how you prepare for that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can say that what you said is true. We did have that conversation on the set, and I did, mention it to, all the actors and crew.
It's also on the documentary.
Is it there? I don't remember if it's set up.
Faith and Fear. It's on there as well.
But the universe doesn't know the difference. And there's a reason for that, because all things are true. We just make the distinction because we choose to live in one fundamental reality instead of recognizing the entirety of it. So, one of the most brilliant things ever said was actually in the Harry Potter, the last Harry Potter movie, when Harry is in that sort of Bardo state and he meets Dumbledore there, who's already dead. And, and he has this exchange with him, before he comes back to life, I guess you could say. And he eventually stops and says to Dumbledore, Headmaster, is this real or is it all in my head? And, Dumbledore in his usual quirky way says, well, of course it's all in your head, Harry, but why should that mean it isn't real? And that is absolutely the problem with our society today, and why it can't relate to religion, and it struggles with spirituality. It's obsessed with science and objectivity, but not in a healthy way, and not in like a way that, science used to be about discovering the truth, leaving the possibility. It was never about explaining things away. And that's what it's become. So, now you have scientists that are pretty much like priests of atheism. It's like its own religious belief system. And it operates under the same kind of fundamentals that you see as a distasteful representation in conventional religion. The same thing that drives me away from that. So the fact is, everything's real. Just because we have been conditioned from the point that we were born to believe that only the physicality is the one that matters is a shortcoming in our understanding. The realm of the mind is far more real than all of this out here. And that is a testament to the fact that all the stuff out here that seems so important and real doesn't last for very long. I mean, it's all subject to the laws of entropy. It's all going to pass away. There's nothing on this planet that's going to be here once the sun continues to expand itself and completely consume this earth. And there's not a damn thing any of us can do anything about that. I mean, maybe we can leave the planet and save the species, but everything eventually is lost. And even if you could live like Doctor Who to the very end of the universe, it will still burn itself out in some kind of heat death or however it all ends. Physicality is impermanent. That is fundamental, which is why that's one of the first tenets of Buddhism, is to understand impermanence and how it causes suffering. There's a reason for that. So how do we reach that state of nirvana? How do we reach that state of enlightenment that they talk about? Or for the Christian, how do you reach the kingdom of heaven? It's again, by surrendering to these preconceptions and these obsessions with the things that don't matter. We put value in the places where they don't belong. The least important thing is the thing we elevate on the pedestal. And the most important thing we trivialize. Oh, that's all in your head. Which is why to a person with mental illness, all those hallucinations are terrifying. And of course they are, because to that person, it is absolutely real. Psychosis only looks like psychosis from our perspective because we don't see it and we're not experiencing it, but they are. They absolutely are. And it's absolutely real to them. It's the realm of the mind. And that's where we get the word psyche, which is the Greek word for soul. You know, it's the Greek. The ancients even knew that the realm of the mind was the spiritual world. So our thoughts are what create reality. Okay, when you're building a building as an architect, you don't just like manifest the building and then write down the plans. In order to be able to put it into some kind of conceivable way for the contractors to create the building, it has to be sketched out. Where does that come from? It comes from the architect's mind. Doesn't come from somewhere else. It comes from the realm of the mind. Then it becomes a physical building. So the realm of the mind is the more important one. We trivialize that. And so the universe is mostly incorporeal. So most of what it responds to, cosmically speaking, on a spiritual level or otherwise, metaphysically perhaps, is going to be that incorporeal stuff. All that incorporeal matter, that's the thought, the realm of the thought, which is where we get our stories, our archetypal stories that create these wonderful movies like Conjuring and, these wonderful books like Harry Potter or whatever, these fantastic places that we can lose ourselves in. And why does that feel like so much? If you see two lovers on a park bench going at it, you're like, get a room. But yet when it's in a movie, it's like, it's beautiful and it's wonderful. I want to see more. I mean, look at we watch Outlander, and the early seasons of Outlander were very graphic, almost soft porn in a way. And it's like, people can't get enough of that. But if you saw that in real life, you'd be calling the cops.
You'd be horrified.
You would be horrified. So why is it when it's in art and it's in theater, it's beautiful, but when it's in real life, we hate it? It's because of that. It's like that kind of connection. We can speak to those archetypes intuitively. We know that's the higher truth.
Experiencing
yes, we feel it. Just like how, you walk around naked, you're going to get yourself arrested, right? But yet we can go and, you get the wonderful sculptures like Michelangelo's David and all this stuff. And we're okay with that. You can go to Caesar's Palace and there's this big naked man there, larger than life. And we have no problem with that. But if there was an actual man doing that, we'd be scandalized because we can't deal with the physicality aspect of it. It hits too close to home and we realize that that's the emptiness of it. The beauty's in the actual thought. So that's what the universe responds to. So when we create movies and we do all of this stuff, I'm trying to be brief here because there's a lot to say about that. That's what it's doing. So yes, it is responding, and that is dangerous. So as far as it pertains to my work as an exorcist, most of the things that I exorcise from people are their conceptions of the truth, and they create this demonic reality around their traumas or their pathologies or all sorts of dysfunction. It creates a personified torturer for them. So if they were abused as a child, now they have this ethereal abuser to continuously create harm in their life. And that it has to be something that is expelled on a spiritual level, as well as a mental one, as well as a physiological one. So you need a holistic approach. The exorcist isn't sufficient. The exorcist facilitates the spiritual, the psychologist facilitates the mental, and the medical doctor facilitates the physiological. And if we all work together, these patients can find true healing. But unfortunately, everybody wants to do their own thing. Only the exorcist, they think it's all demons, and the doctor thinks it's all, medical problems, and the psychologist thinks it's all in your head. Well, it's all of that is not going to help a damn person. You have to create a holistic approach. We all need to work together and understand how the metaphysics works. And nobody talks about that anymore because it's like, oh, it's all superstition and it's all nonsense. But, some of us, understand it, and we try to do our best to make this accessible to the world. And hopefully through shows like yours and shows like mine and everything else, we can get the world to hear more about this and destigmatize it so people get help when they need it.
I think that's a really interesting explanation. And I had never really, even after knowing you all these years, have heard or thought about those three components to create a holistic approach to exorcism. I want to allow people to respond to things that they've heard, ask questions about something maybe they haven't heard. So if anybody has a question, please either speak up, or Michaeline has a question.
You know what I'm going to ask. So when I came a little bit early, so Bryan, you were talking about how you're working on a deck, on your own deck. I'd really love to hear about that.
Yes, my students, we've been in a class, a webinar that's been continuously going for more than 5 years now. And we've covered all sorts of different topics, but the fundamental aspect of it is the perennial truth that I call esoteric mysticism. And what this deals with is essentially the foundation to all religions and where they all find their common ground and how they all came to be the way they are, and the different perspectives that sort of influence this perennial truth. And one of the things that gets created, I guess, out of this model is an entire language, just like the archetypes tend to do. And so because so much of the model deals with learning how to work with archetypes, interpret archetypes, hear and listen to archetypes, speak that divine language. What we do in this class is essentially are constantly dealing with studying runes and I Ching and all these different oracles, but astrology is what we're working on now. But we just came out of about 2 years of creating our own oracle deck that deals with the foundational archetypes, not as a replacement for the tarot, mind you, but as an accessory deck to help clarify those readings where it's like, I'm not quite sure what it's trying to tell me. You can do your tarot in the traditional way, and if you need clarification, you can use my esoteric mysticism deck to sort of get that more clarified answer. It's sort of like a distilled response to these archetypes. They're less heavy than what you get. They're more raw and naked than what you get out of the traditional tarot. Now, as a disclaimer that James had earlier, we tried for years to get artists to create this for us because I'm actually a fairly good artist. I don't have the time to be able to create all of the cards that would be needed for this. I tried, I just did not have the time and commitment that I could devote to it. So I tried to get artists encouraged to do this. They'd also, a lot of them said, oh yeah, I'd love to be a part of it. And then I gave them all the information and months went by, I never get anything back. So at that point, I just shelved the idea. And then we entered the advent of AI. And so at that point, I had students that were doing something very interesting with these AI art generators. They were asking it questions as if it were an oracle, and to see what picture it would create off of their question. And then they would interpret the question. And then they were getting some interesting results, and we were sharing them in class. And we were, I was trying it out for myself to see how the synchronicity was working with that particular thing as an oracle, because you could use it in that same way. The AI you don't know where it's going to take it. I mean, even the people that create this stuff don't know exactly how it works or how it comes up with its answers. It's kind of scary in that way, but it is really almost a direct connection to this cosmic energy that we're all around. So I thought, well, what a great way to try to do this. And then I said, what if we were to have it create an image based upon my deck? Like, I already had the prompts as to what the card should look like based upon the various archetypes, but I don't have the artist to create it. So why don't I see what the AI comes up with? And so I had it create 10 different versions of the same prompt. And then what I did is we took them into the class, and then every week I'd present a new archetype, and the students would then pick the ones they felt represented that archetype the best. And if there was more than one answer, and a lot of times there were, where there'd be like 3 or 4 that they chose out of the 10, I would combine them into a wash of art. So they're all unique, even beyond the AI. The AI just became the template, and then we altered them to reflect the student experience. And it became an extremely powerful deck. And so we're getting ready to print that. I mean, I'm not publishing it as a professional job. It started out as just being able to provide this for my students, but we're going to make it available to those in the know who might want this. And I'm not trying to put artists out of work, not at all. I would have loved to have paid someone to do the job. No one actually would complete the job. So that's where it came to, where, well, let's do the AI. And it became just an interesting experience with dealing with synchronicity and seeing what some non-human intelligence could interpret from these spiritual things that should be far divorced from something that's inorganic like a computer. And the results are amazing. So the art is fantastic, and I will have it available soon, and I'll post pictures of examples if anybody's interested on my social media.
Bryan, I did send, when we sent the initial invite around, the links that you provided, but maybe at some point before we log off, you could put in the chat some of your more relevant links. I mean, to your show and your social media.
Sure.
So Amy wanted you to speak a little bit more about freedom before holiness when you mentioned that.
Sure.
Idea.
So in the traditional Christian theology, for those who might be familiar with it, or at least loosely familiar with it, there's this thing called original sin, right? Adam and Eve were created perfect and immortal. And then Eve's tempted by the serpent to eat of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and disobedience to God, because he said to them that you could eat from all these trees, just not that one. But she gets convinced to do it because the serpent says, if you do this, you'll be like God and you'll understand. And so it's called the tree of knowledge of good and evil, because that's where our knowledge of good and evil comes from. And then she convinces Adam to do it. So it becomes like this chain reaction of temptation, and human nature gives in. And that becomes original sin. And so, the biblical story says that they're punished for this. And the penalty for disobedience is death. And so this is where death comes into the world. They were expelled from paradise, which is, now we live in this universe that there's nothing but sickness and death all around us. And if it doesn't get you now, it will get you eventually. We all die. Okay. So that becomes the foundation to why there is a problem that needs to be solved. And that becomes the precursor to Judeo-Christian theology. It's the foundation to Jewish theology, although they do interpret it slightly different. The serpent is not the devil, as a lot of Christians teach. The serpent is what is known in Judaism as Yatzahara. It's the proclivity of humanity to make the wrong choice. It's our kind of proclivity to be selfish and to do things that are self-interested at the expense of other people, which is a very typical human response to things. It's where evil comes from. That is the foundation of evil. So yeah, the story's correct. Not the not the allegory in literal forms. It's the allegory and metaphysical form that matters. These aren't real people. These aren't real characters. These are telling deep spiritual, ineffable truths. And it's a way of conveying it through art to be able to understand something that isn't easy to understand with just plain language. And so the ancients would tell these stories so that it would be easier to remember and it would be more accessible to their cognitive understanding of the world. So that becomes the foundation. Okay. But what does it teach us about the nature of spirituality? Well, it showed that we were given perfect holiness, right? We were made perfect. We were immortal. Not a care in the world. Nothing could harm us. And all we had to do was stay obedient to God. And he only gave us one instruction, which was don't eat that fruit. Of course, it's not really fruit. Again, it's an allegory, right? But we couldn't help ourselves. We did it anyway. And what does God do? Does he step in and say, no, don't do it? No, because our freedom comes first. And because of the divine loves us so much, and just like you, would you want to love someone that you forced into it against their will, where they don't even know? They don't even know that you forced them to do it. They don't even understand that there's an alternative, that maybe you're not the best thing for them. Maybe there's someone better that they would rather love. Do you want to be loved by someone under those kinds of terms, or do you want to be loved unconditionally? The only way to be loved unconditionally and to love unconditionally is to give complete freedom so that it's an absolute choice from both parties. So for God, it was an absolute choice. He didn't need us. We don't add anything to his greatness. If anything, we subtract from the wonder of his creation, but we don't really add to his greatness. We don't subtract from it. He unconditionally loves us, but we don't return that favor. We squander it. And so he lets us do it so that we can learn how to find our way back, so that when we return to him, now it's our choice. So in a way, even though a lot of people are like, why would God ever let something like this happen? Why would God ever, do something to the effect that he would be like so cruel as to, punish somebody with death? But you have to understand, first of all, it's not a punishment, it's a consequence. Okay. When you leave perfection, well, you're not going to last anymore. One of the consequences of not being perfect means that you're going to be subject to imperfection. Imperfection eventually wears you away through entropy and you die. Okay, so it's a consequence, not a punishment. And the second thing is he also gives you the methodology for conquering it. And that becomes the path of salvation in Christianity. It becomes the path of enlightenment in Buddhism. But I mean, they all come taking us back to the same general way. It's just different approaches to it. But again, freedom's at the core of it all. It doesn't mean anything if we're not free. If we can't make that choice, there's no merit in it. And so God doesn't want some blind dummy loving him. God wants an equal relationship, and he is giving us the tools to get there. And the only way to get there is to conquer it for ourselves, and with help, because I mean, we're not God, obviously. We're not that capable, but he gives us the means to be able to do it within ourselves so that we can make the free choice. So that's what I mean by freedom is higher than holiness, because if holiness was higher, he would have not let us fall. He would have stopped it. And that's what a lot of people would have wanted. There would have been like, a God who really loved us would have never let it happen. Of course, no. And you have to understand, death doesn't mean a whole lot to an immortal being, okay? So you might think death is a big deal because you don't want to die. But you have to understand, to God, to an immortal entity, something that has always been and will always be, and that's what we could have been and what we will return to if we do play our cards right, no pun intended. But, when it comes down to death, it's not a big deal to immortality. If immortality is accessible, it means nothing in the end. It's just an experience, kind of like a toddler. This is the kind of analogy I give. If you have your toddler and he's playing around on his tricycle or his bicycle with training wheels, he's going to fall when you take those training wheels off. But the training wheels have to come off. Otherwise, he's never going to learn how to ride the bike. But the downside to that is, he's going to stumble a few times and scrape his knee. And when he scrapes his knee, your toddler's going to cry bloody murder because he's going to think it's the end of the world. Oh my God, I can't believe you let me get hurt. Oh my God, I can't believe I'm bleeding. Oh my God, this hurts so much. And then what do you do as the good parent? You're going to wash the knee and you're going to give him a pat on the back and give him a hug. It's okay. You're going to be fine. And then a day later, he's back on that bike. Okay. And then it's over with. But in that moment, it's the end of the world. But you as the parent, you're looking at it, it's like, it's just a scraped knee. For God, death's just a scraped knee. It's not a big deal. We make it a big deal because we're little kids. Okay. We're like little infants crying and having our temper tantrums here on earth. It's time to mature, and religion's not doing a very good job of helping that happen. You know, religion wants to keep you in kindergarten forever. Mm-hmm. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in the postgraduate stuff. So that's where we're at right now. That's what we're talking about today. And that's how freedom is higher than holiness.
Bryan, there was a question in the chat. Somebody wanted to know, is there a reason that Eve was tempted first?
Well, it's an interesting thing. It's esoteric, though. You know, of course, people have used it to marginalize women and you know, again, this misuse of power. But that's not the reason. The reason is that essentially Adam and Eve are the archetypal representatives of yin and yang, of what the Chinese would see as yin and yang, or the active and passive principles in the cosmos. Because death is a passive experience, and passive in the sense that it can't be controlled. You can't exercise your volition against it. And it's absorption. It takes you from a state of order to a state of disorder. It takes you from a state of activity to a state of no more functioning. So it is a yin principle that is at work. And of course, you know, these ancient writers, when they're putting down these allegories and everything, they're thinking like this. We don't think like this today. So it seems kind of wild and bizarre. And then we take it all literally, like it's like Adam and Eve are real people. I mean, it becomes such a childish nonsense, like believing in Mother Goose. I mean, why would you do that? Humpty Dumpty did not fall off a wall. Okay? He's not a real guy. You know, we don't need to cry about that. But people have turned Adam and Eve into real people. Okay, and missing the whole point. Eve is the personification of yin, and it is through yin that death comes into the world. Okay, so she would be the first one. You probably heard that thunder there. I don't know if you came through on your microphone, but we're having a bad thunderstorm. It's coming, another one coming through. But yeah, so that's why Eve was first, because death has to come through the passive principle.
Thank you. I'm going to wrap this up unless anybody else has any burning questions you want to ask the bishop or Tracy. Happy to entertain those. I also added a couple of links in the chat. Bishop has a podcast called Vestiges After Dark that is, you can access some of those episodes through your YouTube link. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yep. At Nicholean, Nicholean. Just go to YouTube, and it's just youtube.com/@Nicholean. And that takes you right to the channel, and everything that we do in the ministry, as well as the more secular entertaining stuff, is contained in that one spot.
And the bishop was kind enough to invite me to be a guest on his program, so I'll be doing that in October. And
can't wait. That's gonna be so cool. It was supposed to be this summer, this summer special, but unfortunately, I got called away to do an emergency, and it's going to be a televised show. So it just happened to fall during that week. We had to postpone it, and I think it was past your availability, James. So. But we'll do it in October, and it'll actually be more fun because it'll be like close to Halloween and spooky. We can get into
it. Yeah, it'll be fun. And do you know yet when the emergency that you're being called to it's for Ghost Adventures is being televised, right?
Correct.
Do you know when, or it's too soon to know when they'll
I know
air that episode?
Oh, when they air it, it depends on how they want. He usually likes to push them out pretty quickly. So I would think it would be probably 3 or 4 months after we shoot, typically. But it's been times where you saved it for later in the season. They don't necessarily release them in the order that they filmed them. So it can vary. It's kind of up to the discretion of both the producers and the network, I would imagine. But it will air on Discovery Channel. And it will also be on the Discovery Plus streaming service right away, I believe. And so I'll just watch my social media for when it becomes available, but it should be an interesting case. It's my first case with Ghost Adventures in a few years. We didn't shoot during COVID, so it's nice to get back into it.
Cool. Thank you so much for doing this today, and thanks everybody for joining. I hope that your questions were answered and some new questions were raised that you can.
And congratulations to you, James, for this successful second Tarot Talk show. And I wanted to say goodbye to Bryan and Tracy, and I really enjoyed the conversation. So thank you again so much. I'm gonna try to look into the podcast, but like Bryan, if you find those very old things, those very old things from the early blog hours, I'll be excited to listen to them. And well, yeah, have a great evening, everyone. James, thank you again for this wonderful program, and we'll talk.
Thank you, Letty, for hosting it. I really appreciate you giving me this platform.
Well, I mean, I think you're doing a great job with it, so I'm enjoying it very much, and I'm very grateful you're, again, like you took this great initiative. I think it's really wonderful. Everyone, have a great evening, and I'll see you all very soon for more tarot-related material. Have a great evening. Bye-bye.
This was great. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Tracy. Thank you, Bryan. Bye.
Bye.